My name's Kelly and I have POTS. That's how I started my first TikTok video almost 2 years ago. Now we have grown to over 10,000 followers, and I've gotten to take part in some really cool projects to raise awareness and advocate for people like me. My followers over on TikTok have been asking me to start a YouTube channel and do some longer form content for a while, so I thought we'd give it a go today. Today's video, I do just want to introduce myself a little bit and sort of tell my story, but we're going to have loads more videos on the way about living with POTS, what POTS is, etc. etc. If you haven't seen my face before, my name is Kelly, I'm 20 years old and I'm in my final year of university. I've had POTS since I was about 14 years old. My earliest memories of fainting, I was around that age. I would faint whenever I did any exercise. I remember one day it was Halloween and I was so excited because I was going to a Halloween party, and I jumped out of bed and ran downstairs into the kitchen. But before I could actually talk to my dad, I blacked out, fell forward, hit my head on the kitchen counter, and then fell backwards and landed flat on the floor. I remember regaining consciousness as my dad carried me onto the sofa, but I couldn't open my eyes, couldn't speak, and it was a really, really scary experience. When I started fainting in PE at school, I definitely went to the doctors a lot. I was being wheeled out of lessons and sent home quite frequently, but the doctors said that it was either anxiety or to do with my menstrual cycle, and that all young girls went through this. I've since met many, many people with POTS that were told the exact same thing. Fast forward to when I was 18, I started university and it was the most exciting thing I'd ever done. I'd never really been away from my parents for longer than a week, so moving to this new place without knowing anyone was really, really scary. Within just a couple of weeks, I was living my best life. I'd made loads of friends, I was really enjoying my course, and for a few months, I got the proper uni experience. In January 2024, I was on my period. Everything seemed fine until I woke up one morning, went to the bathroom, and there was blood everywhere. I'm not afraid of blood in any way, shape, or form, but I was absolutely terrified and I knew that something was really, really wrong. I was trying not to panic, so I started to clean myself up. However, when I stood up from the toilet, I fainted. Of course, at this point, I thought that fainting was completely normal for young girls, so I didn't really think much of it. So I called 111, mostly in concern about the blood. The operator was quite dismissive until I began to lose consciousness on the phone. I had mentioned that I'd fainted, but she seemed to think that it was because of the blood, which I guess makes sense. I went back and forth with a few different calls and they told me to go into A&E. I spent 12 and a half hours in A&E. I had so many tests and examinations, but eventually they used tranexamic acid to slow the bleeding and sent me home. I never found out what caused the bleeding. Everything was fine for a couple of days until I fainted again, and then I just didn't stop. At the time, I was training for a half marathon for charity, and I genuinely think it was the amount of exercise that really did me in. I was running 3 times a week as well as going to the gym, and it got to the point where I was fainting every other day. During the next 2 months, I saw, I think, 12 different doctors. This was either appointments of me trying to figure out what was going on, or A&E visits when I'd had particularly nasty faints. And I would like to thank Alex and Orla, who always volunteered to come to the hospital with me and are truly great friends. The doctors all said different things. Some of them said that it was anxiety. Some of them thought it was anemia, which was proven wrong by blood tests. Some of them blamed it on my cycle, even though it had been consistent for months. And one doctor even diagnosed me with a vertigo condition. Each time I got given a new reason, I knew that something still wasn't right. I would spend hours reading through websites and articles about these conditions, and I knew that it didn't fit. One day, I had a really terrible experience with a doctor. She was absolutely convinced that my fainting was being caused by anxiety and tried to refer me for CBT, which I'd already done several times. Things escalated with this doctor because she wasn't listening, and she claimed that I wasn't listening to her when she was telling me what it was, and she ended up making me cry. In my first year, I lived in the flat right next to the doctor's surgery, so I walked up there and made a complaint. The doctors were really apologetic and they made me an appointment with a different doctor the next day. This would be the appointment that changed my life. I didn't have high hopes for my appointment, and I went in there and reeled off the same thing I'd been saying for months. To my surprise, this doctor didn't blame it on anxiety, she didn't blame it on women's problems, and completely disregarded my vertigo diagnosis. Instead, she turned to me and said, "Have you ever heard of POTS?" I vaguely remembered seeing a TikTok about POTS back in lockdown, but I hadn't really thought anything of it, so I didn't know anything about it. She began talking me through it, and it just fit. We read through the list of symptoms together, and I'd never felt more seen. We decided to perform an active stand test, which is where you go from lying down to standing, and they measure your heart rate and blood pressure for 10 minutes. Your heart rate needs to increase by 30 beats per minute to test positive for POTS. Mine increased by 63. After a couple more tests to rule out other things, I was diagnosed with POTS on the 20th of March 2024. I remember feeling a complete mix of emotions. On one hand, I was so relieved to finally have a diagnosis. I spent the rest of the day reading everything I could find, and finally it felt like something fit. I finally knew what had been wrong with me for the past 4 years. On the other hand, I was completely terrified. This was a chronic diagnosis with no cure, something that I would have forever. I didn't know anyone with POTS or really anyone with a chronic condition, and having that conversation with my family and friends was really, really hard. Everyone was super supportive, but there's nothing like telling people you're going to be sick for the rest of your life. That night, I had a dream that I started a TikTok documenting my journey. And in that dream, I called the page Chronically Ill, which obviously is a play on my name. The next day, I went for lunch with my best friend, and we were talking about my diagnosis, and I told her about my dream. I was kidding, but she convinced me to do it, so I made a TikTok account there and then. I posted my first video on the 21st of March, introducing myself and asking if anyone else had this condition. Within a couple of days, I'd completely blown up. I made loads of friends with POTS in the comments of a video that I posted, and that video now has over 1 million views. My doctor advised that I alert the DVLA to my condition, and on the 30th of March, I had my driver's license revoked. From there, things just got worse. I couldn't drive, I was fainting all the time, and things got so bad to the point where I needed a wheelchair. This was something so immensely hard to go through. Just a few months ago, I'd been partying with my friends at university, and now I was being pushed around and almost bedridden. That summer, I started considering whether I could continue with my degree, and I was really, really scared. But then I got put on a beta blocker called propranolol to lower my heart rate, and things very quickly got better. Within a couple of weeks, I'd stopped fainting, and I only needed a wheelchair on bad days. My TikTok was growing, I was doing tons of research on lifestyle changes to help my condition, and in October 2024, I got my driver's license back. Getting my license back was, I think, a turning point for me. That was the moment I kind of realised that I can still live a life despite having this condition, and I could turn it into something positive, into my purpose. It's been a long road since then of many appointments, many low days and struggles, and many opportunities to learn. But today, in January 2025, almost 2 years since my diagnosis, I've met some amazing people with the same condition. I've been documenting my experiences to be able to watch my growth. I've worked with some amazing brands. I get comments and DMs every single day telling me how much my account has helped people. And I've now created a Discord server for people with POTS to have a sense of community and support each other. So that was the unabridged version of my story. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. There will be lots more videos coming all about what POTS is, my experiences living with it, and many other things that have been requested by my TikTok followers. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment if you live with POTS too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.